Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in. Let me start this session by introducing Dr. Sukhpal Singh, who has been kind enough to accept our invitation and join us to deliberate on this very important topic. We have been receiving many requests from various participants to invite Dr. Sukhpal Singh and have an interaction with him. And we contacted him. We approached him, and he kindly accepted our invite. So, first of all, thank you, sir, for giving us your important time and accepting our invite. Dr. Supal Singh, I'll just go through the brief intro. It is a very long YT. You can always have a glance at it visiting the IMA website. So most of us very much know him. There is no requirement of formal introduction, but still I'll just run through his brief introduction. Dr. Supal Singh is a professor and chairperson at Center for Management in Agriculture at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He did his PhD in economics from Institute for Social and Economic Change, Bangalore. He did his MPhil from Center for Development Studies at Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala. He has been fellow of Indian Agriculture Economics, Mumbai, which was conferred on him in 2018. He was Director General, Center for Research in Rural and Industrial Development, Chandigarh, and ICSSR Institute during 2017 and 18. He was visiting fellow at the Asia Research Center, Copenhagen Business School at Denmark during April-May 2014. He was professor and head Agriculture Economic Research Institute and Institute for Economic Growth, IEG Delhi, during the year 2011 and 12. He was selected NABARD Chair Professor under the NABARD Chair Professorship Scheme in 2010. He was visiting fellow at the Institute of Development Studies, Sussex at Brighton, United Kingdom in the year 1999. He was Asia Fellow of the Asian Scholarship Foundation, Bangkok of the International Institute of Education, IIE, at Washington in 2002. He was visiting fellow University of Bangkok in the same year, 2002. He was ESRC ICSSR Exchange Scholar at the University of Manchester, UK in 2010. He was also selected for a 3-month visiting fellowship at Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Shimla in 2010 and 11. He has been handling various editorial responsibilities. We know him as a founding editor of Millennial Asia, an international journal of Asian Studies, which is been published by SAGE, New Delhi. He is member on various. He's been member of editorial board on various journals. Few of them are Food Chain, published by Practical Action UK since 2014. He's member of the editorial review board of the Journal of Agribusiness in the Developing and Emerging Economies, which was been published by Emerald Publishing. He has been on various bodies constituted by central government as the state government. So I'll just run through a few of them. He was member of the expert committee to review training programs of Manage Hyderabad in 2016 and 17. He was member of the committee on warehousing. He was member of the expert committee to formulate policy for development and promotion of FPOs in Punjab. He was member of the Chhattisgarh State Government Committee to suggest minimum support price and or the other alternative ways of assisting farmers of different crops in the state since 2018. So he has been there on various bodies and member of various committees formed by Central Government of India as well as various state governments in India. So I just, without wasting any time and without any further ado, I would directly hand it over to Dr. Sukhpal Singh and request him to start with his deliberation.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I see a lot of friends on the screen, so welcome. I would like to thank Sandeep Hegde, Komal, and Kasper for giving me this opportunity to share some thoughts with you. Before I get in the topic of our today's deliberation, I would like to make a few introductory remarks. And they are: one, that I always look at issues of agriculture and agribusiness from the perspective of small producers and agriculture workers. Uh, so that has been my work throughout, and I continue to do that all the time. Uh, Second, that I believe that size of the farm is not an issue, whether in India or anywhere else, so far as production efficiency in agriculture is concerned. We don't even need to change anything there. Our small farmers are the most efficient producers of anything any farmer does in this country compared with any other category of farmers. This is based on both secondary as well as primary evidence, but that doesn't take us away from the fact that there may be other things to do in terms of aggregation to help those small farmers. Now, the plan about the session is that I would take you through the context. After all, we are talking about farmers, we are talking about agriculture. So we need to know whom are we talking about before we talk about policy about them and the practices in this sector agriculture credit is concerned. So I'll spend some time on that in the beginning. Then we look at the state of affairs in terms of what the policy is, what the practices in the agriculture credit sector are. And I generally do that from two aspects of their working. One is the inclusiveness and the other is effectiveness. Whether these policies and practices are inclusive enough of small producers, and second, whether they deliver the goods on the ground in terms of doing whatever they are supposed to do. In fact, just to sort of remind myself, the main are the two aspects of my work which I always take priority over other objectives of my work, that I always look for inclusion and effectiveness when I do any assessment of any policy or program or situation on the ground in any aspect of the agri value chain. So toward the end, I would share with you some thoughts on what is the way forward for making agri credit deliver these two objectives, that is inclusiveness and effectiveness. So after that, we can open up for question answer discussion as the organizer desire. So I take about maybe 30 to 35 minutes of your time to do these two or three things I mentioned. So if that is okay, we can go ahead with that. I will share some slides with you. Yeah, I think now it's full screen. So this is the kind of topic: agriculture credit policy and practice, a small farmer or small producer perspective. Now, when we talk of farmer, we first need to know who they are, what do they earn, and why do we need to give this credit input to them. Now look at this data, which has come from both NSS as well as the NABARD's financial survey. Financial Inclusion Survey, NAFIS as known as, which is based on 40,000 household survey across 245 districts in 29 states. The most important thing I want to highlight here is that let us remember, or let's become aware of this fact that today even farmers don't earn most of their income from cultivation or farming. Yeah. If you look at this slide, you will see that only 1/3 of their income comes from agriculture household, comes from cultivation, another 8% from livestock. So almost 45 or 50% of the farmer's income comes from non-cultivation, even for owner cultivators, even people who have land. We are not talking only landless households here. Of course, NABARD defines it as any household producing agricultural materials worth rupees 5,000 in a year as farming households. Yeah, NSSO had 3,000 as the definition. So you have that kind of inclusion of households, rural household to agriculture. You see waiting for 1/3, and then you have other aspects of income coming in. And if you divide this further into different categories of landowners or land operators, you will see that there is even a higher share of wages for certain marginal land, small households, land owning households. So one, we are saying that agricultural income or crop income is not the mainstay of even the farming households. Yeah. So once we have sort of appreciated that, then things become much more easy to sort of talk about. If you, I don't want to spend too much time on this. If you look further, now we all hear a lot about this whole farmer distress, agrarian distress, rural indebtedness. So these are the figures again from NABARD survey saying that about more than 50% of the agriculture households are into debt. Now, debt, the even reservations about it, because the way the banking system defines as any outstanding, it considered a debt. Yeah. To me, something which is repayable and you still have not sort of gone beyond the limit or the time period for the repayment should not be called a debt. That is a loan. Yeah. But even if you take this official definition, then you have more than 50% of the rural agriculture households into debt, and debt is of the order of something like 1 lakh rupees per household. And we all hear a lot of noise about loan waiver, debt waiver, and now you have farmers union in this country which have passed alternative sort of bills, parliament bills ready to be taken to parliament, saying that it will complete debt waiver of farmers' loans, whether institutional or non-institutional. Yeah, 10 states have already waived loans to whatever degree, some for certain categories, some for all farmers, some recently or some earlier since 2014-15. So one, that we need to recognize that even if we are looking at this as an important policy aspect, is it a solution? Or it's only a temporary reprieve for the indebted households? Yeah, because one can immediately ask a question that if you are going to waive off the debts of those who have defaulted, then you are being unfair to those who would have repaid despite being in a similar situation by borrowing from other sources or utilizing other sources of mobilizing money. Then why do you waive loans of those who have outstanding against them, not those who have repaid in time? So there's the equity issue also there as well. So I would not delve further into this other than the fact that this is also an issue, but we would look more at the credit provision as a service, as part of the mechanism to support agricultural production. So if you look at from that angle, then we can say that there are basically 3 or 4 segments for agriculture credit. We all know there's a very major component, as you will see from the figures little later, of crop loans, which is nothing but working capital provision for the farmers, for the crop, for the season. And there are investment loans, which are long-term, which are meant for creating capital or assets on the farms to improve their production capacity in a sustainable manner. Then you have non-farm, off-farm credit, and they have consumption loans. And if you look at in terms of the stakeholders or the people who make use of these different types of products, then you have not only men farmers, but also women farmers, because 10-12% of the land is in the name of women. There are many women-headed households, so they are one segment. Then you have vast majority of farming population, which is called small and marginal. I'm not going to go into the definition of these. I assume that you know, but I also doubt that there may be issues with this. Marginal is smaller than the small. So it's written as S&M, but marginal actually is smaller than small. Then you have landless farmers or producers who are called tenants. They may share crop, they may lease in land, they may do both, and so on, who really don't matter in the agriculture credit system as of now. And you have a lot of self-employed people in off-farm kind of occupations. And then you have very commercial farmers in general, but also small and marginal farmers who produce for the market, and they invest in agriculture by borrowing huge amounts of money because they see it as a business. For them, it is more of an agri-business rather than agriculture. So these are the kind of people we were talking about when you look at the policy and practice. Now, what are the major issues in this sector? First is adequacy. Have we provided enough credit to the farm sector? Now, you would remember that there were calls in the last decade about doubling of farm credit during the UPA government. Within a few years, it was raised from 4 lakh crore to 8 lakh crores. In fact, that target was achieved much before the deadline. Then we moved to 9 lakh crores, then 10 lakh crores. Today we are talking about 11 or 12 lakh crores. So that is the macro provision of credit for this sector. The other part of adequacy question could be, is it adequate for those who need it the most? And here I mean marginal farmers, small farmers, and tenants. We look at those aspects when we look at the inclusiveness and effectiveness of this aspect. Then you have access. Who all, even if you have enough credit available in the sector provided by the banking system or the government, are people able to access it without undue cost, access it with lower transaction cost or reasonable transaction cost? So we will look at farmer types and regions. Yeah, for example, one of the facts of life in this context is that commercial banks, which are the largest players in agriculture credit today, as you will see a little later, cover only 40% of this segment of farmers who are marginal or small. As you all know, 85% of the farm operators are marginal or small. So of that, the commercial banks cover only 40%. Now there is a catch here, which we will look at a little later. The third dimension is efficiency or relevance of the credit products. Are they serving the purpose they are meant for? For example, short-term loans versus long-term loans. We talked about crop loans versus investment loans in the earlier slide. The reality now is that 70% of the credit being delivered to the farm sector today is short-term, mainly crop loans. So once we have such large proportion going only for working capital purposes, how does one improve the capital formation in the sector? And this largely happened because of two policy distortions or policy provisions, depending on how you look at it. You can call it distortion or just a provision. One, the interest subvention, which was given in 2006 on crop loans. The other was 3% subsidy on interest on crop loans, which was available if you made prompt repayment on time. Yeah. And so that is one part of relevance, whether we are going to the right segments for right purposes or we are missing the bus somewhere. The other aspect is crop loans or cultivation loans, whether short term or long term, versus allied sectors, whether fisheries, poultry, dairy, small ruminants or any other such allied activity, allied to agriculture, that gets only 10%. So this is about the relevance of the products which we have in terms of package being delivered to agriculture sector. The third part is effectiveness. Even when somebody gets the loan, does it serve the purpose? Now, there is this whole debate going on about arbitrage. That because the interest rates for the farm loans are so low, in fact, they vary from anywhere between 4% to as low as 0% in some states. The question being raised by some of the scholars is whether this is being used to avail of this low cost interest free credit and put into fixed deposits by the farmer which give you 7 to 8% interest. This can be called a misuse of the credit provision, yeah, or you don't repay because there are no interest costs. So non-repayment. Further, because so easy credit, cheap credit, people go for it, but without looking at the viability of the project for which it is undertaken. Are the crops grown? For the other additional activities like dairy, poultry, and other projects taken up by certain categories of farmers, they do not do adequate, even in the banking agencies, I think, can't go beyond a point that you do not do adequate assessment of the which are missing many times, because just enabling somebody to produce enough or more is not good enough unless that stakeholder or beneficiary can convert that into real value in terms of incomes after a good sales realization. Yeah. The other part which I mentioned briefly earlier is the high cost. The interest rates for long-term loans especially are very high still, and transaction cost involved is again substantial, which drives people away from either taking this loan or making a good use of it. So this is all about the way the banking system or credit system interfaces with the borrower. But there's another sort of elephant in the room which we need to bring in, because without that we will not be able to complete the story. That is that despite all the efforts, we still have about 1/3 of the agriculture credit needs being met from informal or non-institutional sources. This is being met through a system of interlocked functioning of credit and other markets, especially produce markets. That those who lend to these farmers who for whatever reasons cannot approach the formal system for meeting their credit needs, even for productive purposes, these lenders who may be a trader, maybe a money lender, professional money lender, maybe a commission agent, maybe a big farmer in the village, they tie up this credit with the produce sale, saying you can borrow from me, but you will sell through me or to me. Similarly, they supply inputs on credit. Here, the viability of a farmer or the borrower is compromised, because when this kind of interlocking or interlinkage of credit happens with other produce and other markets, there is an implicit and explicit exploitation. Because one, there is overpricing of inputs. I'm not even talking of quality right now, because you are borrowing, you are not paying in cash, you are buying it on credit. You cannot really demand the kind of choice, the kind of quality you would like to have. And the other is the underpricing of your produce or output when you give it to this lender. I want to mention a small thing here that some scholars, some friends of mine have been saying that a lot of input sales at the farmer level now take place in cash. I tend to sort of differ with that it may look a cash transaction at the face of it when it's being done at the counter, but actually that money with the farmer is paying up there may be a credit backed cash or credit backed purchase by the farmer. So at this spot, it doesn't look like he has money in his pocket or her pocket, but actually that money may not belong to him or her. The other part of this, which I don't know how many of you are aware, people who are in the north, especially in Punjab, Haryana, people know this. This is a big issue which is going on for the last 25 years. That when I mentioned this in the class here or anywhere I deal with students, when I mention this, they laugh. When I ask this question to them, that when a farmer sells her produce, who should get the payment? They immediately sort of smile, laugh, and say, sir, what is this question? It should be the farmer whose produce it is. Said, no, in some states of India, the farmer sells his or her produce not only to private buyers, but even to government buyers like FCI, but his produce payment goes to somebody else who has the role of a facilitator as an agent between the buyer and the seller, and the payment goes to him in his name, not in farmer's name. This issue is hanging fire in the state of Punjab for the last 20 years. 3 governments have come and gone. It is not still sorted out. It is all because of the interlocked credit and produce markets there. If we move further, looking at some of these aspects in detail, where does the, as I said, what is the state of the art in terms of state of affairs in terms of whether these aspects are being attended to or not? If you look at adequacy in terms of the macro and segment specific availability of money as credit, is being delivered as credit to make that produce or production happen. But the other end of it is that it is just 13% of the gross bank credit, which is in line with the share of agricultural GDP to the total GDP of the country. Yeah. And the farmer default is not very high here, just 6%. Yeah. So a lot of people say it's very high. So despite all this, we are pumping in so much money into the sector. And as I mentioned earlier, we had 11 lakh crores made available in last year, 18-19. Yeah. And a lot of people say that this is basically being done to reduce consumption inequality rather than attending to the income inequality, because income inequality cannot be attended so easily. And credit target for this sector has always exceeded whatever credit target has been set by the government. The banking sector has always outdone that, either on time or before time. So that is one dimension of it. The second is, when we say farmers placed where? In some states, you have credit dispersals which are more than the total agri GDP of the state. That's why you're getting that 51% average. Yeah, and that credit being disbursed is 3 to 6 times of the input costs. I'm sure you have heard of this term, scale of finance. How the limits for financing different crops are determined by the state level banking committee in different states with